It's always bittersweet when an era of gaming comes to an end. Almost 20 years after the console released, Microsoft finally shut down the marketplace for Xbox 360 on July 29th of this year. Its successor, Xbox One, launched nearly 11 years ago now, and after they initially balked at including backwards compatibility with it, Microsoft recommitted to preserving Xbox's biggest titles on Xbox One and beyond. This gave us the best versions of these older games on much better hardware. It also left few reasons to go back to the 360. I was no exception to this. I packed my 360 up and put it up in my closet once the games I cared about became playable on newer hardware, and I only dusted it off when I absolutely needed to play a game I couldn't play anywhere else. In spite of this, every time an older console finally wraps up its life, it's impossible not to look back. I'm a seasoned vet in saying goodbye to older consoles now, with the Wii, Wii U, and 3DS shops all shutting down in the last few years. I still bought my fair share of games digitally on the Wii U and 3DS, but I didn't own those systems in their own time. I may not have had Wi-Fi until the last year of the 360's life, but it was undeniably the most important console for my formative years. Today, I want to look back at my personal experience with the Xbox 360, my story with it, the games I played, and the memories that were made. This is entirely my own personal perspective. There were a lot of big titles that I never played, and some I only played on newer hardware in the past couple years. I'm not going to spend much time on the experiences that I didn't have. Instead, I'm going to focus on my own journey. I hope you'll join me as I say goodbye to an era of my life through the lens of this console. A console that left an indelible mark on me, my friends, and so many others. Let's look back at the Xbox 360 through my eyes. If you've seen my Halo videos, you've heard a lot of my gaming story already. I grew up an only child in a very rural area. I didn't have a lot of friends and certainly didn't have a way to connect to the internet back then. Even without people to play with regularly, I fell in love with video games. My oldest memories include playing the N64 with my parents as a toddler, and a few years later, getting a GameCube for Christmas when I was 5. A few years after that, my horizons got expanded further when we got an Xbox in my house. My dad originally got it for himself, but it quickly became mine. Around that same time, my cousins had an infamous Halo 2 LAN party in my bedroom during Thanksgiving. I had never seen anything like Halo 2. I just had to play it. After getting my hands on Halo 1 and 2 the next year when I was 7, I was completely hooked. When I learned the next Xbox was coming later that very year, I knew it had to be mine. What I didn't know was how long I'd have to wait for it. As much as I wanted it, there was just no chance I was getting a 360 the same year we got an original Xbox in my house. My parents really spoiled me as a kid, which I'll always love them for, but at the time, I was frustrated. A Game Boy Advance, GameCube, and Xbox just weren't enough. I needed a 360. Until the next year, when I needed a Wii. When you're a kid, it doesn't take much to latch onto a new craze. Christmas '06 rolled around, and instead of a Wii or a 360, I got a PS2. Okay, cool, but where the hell was the Wii? Surely it's not impossible to get right now, and surely it's not going to stay that way for the next 2 or 3 years. It didn't come the next year either in 2007. What did come in '07 was Halo 3, which released on the 360 in September of that year. That snapped me right back into the Xbox 360 craze. I got to try it out on my cousin's 360 that year. From that point on, I couldn't tell you which I wanted more between the Wii and the 360. I took every single chance I could to try out either of them, and I did that for a good few years there. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, my parents took me to a lot of parties that my cousins hosted at their house. While they were playing beer pong in the basement, I was playing the 360 upstairs. I can't begin to tell you how much I looked forward to these parties in that time. I got to play Halo 3 a lot. I got to shred in Guitar Hero and really struggle with the drums in Rock Band, sometimes with some drunk cousins filling out the rest of the band with me. I got a taste of some cool game that was set in Liberty City, city I'd never heard of at the time, and I punched people out in UFC Undisputed just as my MMA phase was really getting started. It wasn't the same as owning a 360, but I still treasured every single moment that I got. I finally got the Wii for Christmas in 2008 when I was 10 years old. At 10, I was young enough to still love the Wii, but getting old enough to realize I did want more than just games that were made for kids. I was entering middle school at this point, which means I was mature now, dammit. I wanted the mature console, and that was not the Wii. That was the 360. At Christmas '09, I was absolutely positive that I was finally going to get the 360, and when I didn't, I was pissed off to say the least. The next year, finally, at the age of 12, I got a 360 for Christmas in 2010, along with a very healthy group of games to go with it. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I felt like I finally had everything I'd ever wanted, like my life had peaked at that point. I've been so focused on wanting those two consoles, particularly this one, for so long. Looking back, I can definitely say that I was a spoiled kid and that my obsession with what I wanted prevented me from truly appreciating what I had. I want to yell at 7-year-old me for not treating my Game Boy and GameCube with enough respect. I want to tell 12-year-old me not to cast the Wii aside entirely for the 360. But no matter how I feel about myself looking back, The truth is, I was just so excited to finally have that console in my hands. And so, my journey began. Obviously, the most important discussion point of a console should be its games, and don't worry, we're going to get into a lot of those here in just a second. With that in mind though, I do want to talk about what else the 360 had to offer first. Little things like this do contribute quite a bit to a console's personality, and I really care a lot about this kind of thing. I sunk a lot of time into editing my avatar on 360. There's a commendable amount of customization here, and that's not even considering the coolest parts. Avatar Editor offers a bonus of letting you deck yourself out with awards that you've gotten from other games. I've decked myself out in the past to the Spartan helmets from Halo 4, the cowboy attire from Red Dead Redemption, and even turned myself into the Joker at the height of my Batman fandom in 2013. You could also pay to customize yourself with other accessories from games, movies, sports, you name it. I never really paid for this stuff unless I had Microsoft points to spare. Oh yeah, remember Microsoft points? Microsoft decided to add steps to the purchase process, and made their own currency in the process. They complicated things just a bit. $5 got you 400 points, and you could buy up to 1,600 points for $20 at a time. $1 translating to 80 points never made much sense to me, but you did get used to it after a while. Another thing I enjoyed was selecting a gamer picture. On today's consoles, you can just upload any photo from any device to make a good custom gamer pic. It's a nice convenience, but I do miss the suite of gamer pics that Xbox 360 provided. The ones that came with the console in particular are still seared into my memory to this very day. My favorites were always the angry monkey and the skater boy with the bubblegum. You could also download themed gamer pics, which I've always personally preferred. I've had this Wolverine one for years. You could do the same with themes for the home screen, which is another feature that's been replaced since with uploaded pictures or screenshots from gameplay. This doesn't all seem groundbreaking now, but it really was for me at the time. Lastly, of course, is the actual reason for this video, which is the Xbox 360 Marketplace. This was the first digital store that I had ever experienced on a console. I finally got Wi-Fi at home in 2013, a few years after I got into 360 for the first time. I didn't become a predominantly digital gamer until the next generation, but I did buy a few games digitally here and there on 360, which included free-to-play games like Happy Wars and World of Tanks that I played with friends. I think the first time I actually used it, if I recall correctly, was to get Minecraft, when its popularity was surging and absolutely no one in school would shut up about it. My main uses for digital games came in 2013 when Xbox launched games with Gold. In this program, your Gold subscription would provide you with one free game each month. I think it got expanded to 2 and maybe even 3 down the line. This became a pretty regular thing for me in the Xbox One era in particular, when I would just download every single game that was available. I never knew if I'd ever want to play any of these games down the line, so I figured, what the hell, it's free, right? In those early days on the 360, there was nothing like the feeling of a game you're actually interested in becoming free. I still specifically remember Fable 3, which was the first game that was made available on Games with Gold, being a huge deal for my friend group, because it was during the summer, we were all playing Fable 3 that first day because it was such a cool novelty, and then none of us ever played it again after that day, I'm pretty sure, but it was still a fun time. With this being the first generation where you had to pay to play online if you were a 360 owner, plus the not so great response that the Xbox One received when it got unveiled the previous month, Microsoft used this chance to throw players a bone and add some value to Xbox Gold in the process. And better games did come after Fable 3. I also used the Marketplace to download video apps. Our internet barely worked well enough to stream video, but I made do. At this time, I specifically used Netflix pretty much all the time. Outside of that, I also watched Game of Thrones for the first time on HBO Go, before it became HBO Now, which became HBO Max, which of course is now just Max. You gotta be sure to keep up. I also used it for my wrestling fix. WWE Network came out in February 2014, and I downloaded that on my 360, and that was my pathway to seeing a lot of wrestling I'd never been able to see before now that so much was on demand. There are also the built-in video apps like movies and TV, but I didn't really use those much. I'm a lifelong physical media collector, and I had a Blu-ray player at this point, so I only ever really used the Xbox to watch movies when I was watching stuff on Netflix or HBO. Of course, the streaming marketplace is way more complicated now, and I have internet that's actually worth a damn now, but again, it all started here for me. It was humble beginnings, but I do look back fondly. So, with that all out of the way, let's finally talk about some games. When I got my 360 in 2010, I started out with a pretty good variety of titles. The games I remember getting on day one include Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, Madden NFL 10, NBA 2K10, UFC Undisputed 2010, Grand Theft Auto 4, and the double pack of LEGO Batman and Pure. With Christmas money, I rounded things out with a cheap used copy of Halo 3 and a not so cheap used copy of NCAA Basketball 2010. This is a pretty good crop to me, probably a bit heavy on the sports games, but I wanted all my bases covered. I know myself, and I know that when each season rolls around, I'll want to have that sports game on hand. The first game I really sunk my teeth into over that winter break was UFC Undisputed 2010. This one felt more refined than I remembered 09 being and had the absolute perfect roster to me. 2010 was the height of my short-lived MMA fandom, and the game scratched my itch for a good UFC game, even though the career mode wasn't the best. NBA 2K10 was good, but had some major freezing problems and a few game-breaking glitches that I recall. A couple years later, I got the next game in the series, 2K11, which I had a lot more fun with. The Michael Jordan mode in 2K11 was genuinely educational for me. I was a massive sports fan, which I still am, but I had no internet connection, and this was the best way that I could use to learn as much as I could about basketball history. It was a great tool for that. It's probably my favorite basketball game overall to this day. What's not my favorite basketball game is NCAA Basketball 10. This game always looked and felt so weird to me. The last few NCAA basketball games had this really strange, gritty look, and they felt so unrefined for an EA Sports game at the time. I played it a lot, but never dug it like I wanted to. I do hope we eventually get a revival for this series like we finally got this year for football. Speaking of football, I never owned a college football game on the 360, but I did own Madden 10, and later Madden 13. Unfortunately for me, the 360's run mostly coincided with a pretty bad downturn for my hometown Kansas City Chiefs. 13 in particular was a struggle since the 2012 season for the Chiefs was their absolute worst season ever. I played every year of Madden from 05 through 08 on the older consoles, but I was less inclined to get them in this era. They still supplied the football fix, but not much more for me. If you know me, you know I'm an absolutely massive pro wrestling fan. I owned every WWE GameCube game and had a few of the abysmal original Xbox games too. The 360 era was dominated by the Smackdown vs. Raw series. Rather than having different games on different consoles as they had the previous generation, WWE games became a standardized multi-platform annual franchise, with a few exceptions here and there. I didn't actually own any SVR games on the 360 since I did have a few on the Wii already. What I did own was WWE All-Stars. This is a throwback to the more arcadey wrestling games of years past, and a welcome change from the annual simulation titles that we were inundated with at that point. I absolutely adored All-Stars at the time, and one of my bigger gaming regrets is that I ended up selling my copy of it a couple years later to buy something else. It's really pricey now to buy it back, but I would absolutely go back if I still had it handy. I did play one of the annualized games pretty extensively on 360, which was WWE 12. For whatever reason, they did away with the Smackdown vs. Raw branding briefly with WWE 12 and 13, before 2K took over the series with 2K14, which is still the series that happens to this day. WWE 12 was a decent time, but nothing special. Gameplay in the standard WWE games tends to blend together for me, and the most memorable aspects of this one were its batshit crazy story mode and the impressively deep creation suite that it offered. I actually spent a lot of time in the creation suite, which is pretty rare for me. This game does have a heavy focus on the old company, WCW, which the young wrestling historian in me did greatly appreciate. The craziness of its Road to WrestleMania mode and the depth of the creation modes are pretty much all I remember from this one now. It's otherwise just a typical WWE game from the time. A couple years back, I bought Smackdown vs. Raw 2007, which was the first game from WWE to release on the 360, alongside WWE 13. I haven't dug into 13 much yet, but I'm really eager to play its Attitude Era mode. SVR 07 is a wrestling game that I hold in really high regard from when I owned it on the PS2 back in the day. It's exactly as I remember, and I enjoy going back to it from time to time. It probably sounds like I played a lot of these games during this era, but the 360 does ultimately represent an era of wrestling games when I began to step back and focus on other titles. The game I played most from that original crop is actually the one that I was least excited about when I unwrapped it on Christmas Day. I dabbled with this one a bit at my cousin's house, but I can't say I was particularly interested to play more of it. Thankfully, I gave it another chance, and I am so glad I did. Grand Theft Auto 4 was my entry point into open world games, and within just a few hours I was completely hooked. I spent entire days plowing through missions and just wandering around Liberty City, being a responsible citizen, committing no crimes whatsoever. I think this was the point I started taking games more seriously as a whole. It felt like the game that truly expanded my horizons beyond the shooters and sports games I've been playing so much to that point. I hadn't really paid attention to stories in games before this. As a kid, cutscenes were the enemy as far as I was concerned, and I skipped them in everything I played no matter what. GTA 4 changed that. I was genuinely invested in Nico as a protagonist unlike I'd been in any game before. GTA 4 also hit me at the right time. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, pop culture in general was obsessed with being dark and gritty, and Rockstar responded by making by far its grittiest, most serious entry in the GTA series. As a teenager when I beat the game, I was the perfect age for that type of tone. I was obsessed with GTA 4, and I carried that obsession through right to the DLC. I bought the episodes from Liberty City on disc since I still didn't have internet at home. It was the first DLC of its kind I'd ever experienced, and it extended the life of the game tremendously for me. On a more specific personal note, every GTA has been the gateway for me to experience classic music that I haven't heard before, and the soundtracks in both the base game and the DLC introduced me to some real classics. It's safe to say GTA 4 was incredibly influential on me, and that made me unbelievably excited for its sequel, which released at the very end of the 360's run in September 2013. It's since been surpassed, I think, but GTA 5 was by far my most anticipated game of all time to that point. I remember not being able to sleep the night before that game came out, and I remember barely being able to make it through the school day before I got home to play it. I'm much more critical of GTA 5 nowadays, and even then I never loved it quite like I wanted to, but I sunk so much time into that game. I got as close as I ever have to 100%ing a Rockstar game, including running in circles for a whole half hour during the fucking stupid Kiflam side mission. I was hopelessly into this game, both offline and online. I only played a couple months of GTA 4's online before 5 came out, but I was with 5 from the beginning. I was with everybody else waiting for 2 years to finally get heist added to multiplayer. For a good couple years there, I was locked into GTA 5. It's the biggest single gaming event that I've ever witnessed, probably to this day. In between GTA's 4 and 5, I branched out with another Rockstar game, Red Dead Redemption. I'd heard about Red Dead when it came out, but knew very little about it beyond the Western setting. I saw a cheap used copy at GameStop and took a chance on it. This was another Rockstar game I was hesitant about, but it won me over really quickly, just like GTA 4. It felt more refined, and the Western setting really does so much to make it feel more unique than a game like GTA set in a big city in modern day. It's obviously sparser with its layout, but I also remember the geography of the map like the back of my hand, and I remember the layout of pretty much every town in the game. It was one of my favorite stories in gaming for a long time, and it still is, even though I prefer its sequel overall. It also had a fun online component. Rockstar's worlds are just fun to fuck around in with friends. I always specifically remember a cabin up in tall trees that has infinite bears around it that keep spawning to come attack you. My friends and I would hole up inside the cabin and hold off as many of the bears as we could until either they glitched inside the cabin and killed us, or we got glitched outside and got left to our fate. We would kill hours just doing that. I've replayed all the Rockstar games I've mentioned here within the last couple years, and to me Red Dead 1 holds up the best both from a story and gameplay perspective. It also got its own expansion, capitalizing on the zombie craze from the time, Undead Nightmare. I wish I had more specific memories of this one, but my memories are clouded by a game-breaking glitch that still happens if I try and play it now. I think I've heard this only happens on the Game of the Year Edition's disc version, which is the only way that I've actually played this expansion. After a certain amount of playtime, the zombies just start spawning without heads, making them unkillable and the game impossible to proceed with unless I restart entirely. Then, once I do that, I just have to hope it lasts longer before the glitch happens so I can make some progress. It's not ideal, and it does ruin my judgment of what's otherwise a pretty fun, very goofy expansion. My Rockstar story didn't stop there, though. I remember sitting at home on the couch seeing a TV spot for LA Noire in 2011, and I was hyped. Of course, now I know that they only published this one and didn't develop it themselves, but Rockstar's brand value does go a long way, and it certainly did for me then. I finally got it about a year later, and I was expecting another open-world Rockstar classic with a cool 1940s noir setting. That's not exactly what I got. I can't say I was disappointed with LA Noire. I did like it, but it just wasn't what I was expecting. You can explore LA, responding to crime reports around town, but it lets you have your partner drive you around so you can skip the downtime and speed up the game, which is unfortunately how I played the game back then. The core of the game is doing actual detective work. The game infamously relies on you reading very, very, very subtle facial cues in order to determine whether someone's telling the truth or lying to you during an interrogation. I'd be interested to see how this one holds up for me now. I enjoyed the alternate history elements, including solving the Black Dahlia murders. I did also appreciate when the action began to pick up in the second half of the game. As a 14-year-old, that's all I had the patience for at the time. I don't know exactly how I feel about LA Noire today, but it is one that I'm interested to revisit at some point. A Rockstar game that was never on my radar was Max Payne 3, which was an unexpected Christmas present that I opened one year. My parents knew I was a Rockstar Games fan at this point, and when they saw the logo on the box, I think that was just enough for them. I have not played Max Payne 1 or 2 to this day, but I did play through 3 from start to finish once I got it. I was once again expecting an open world game, and instead what I got was a pretty linear third-person shooter. The best thing about this game to me is the score and soundtrack from Health. The overall story and gameplay are fine enough with the expected Rockstar polish, but I can't say this is a favorite of mine either. Whenever I play it again, it will be with the full perspective after I've played the first 2 games finally. That covers my experience with Rockstar on the 360, a few of my favorite games of all time, my most anticipated game of all time, and a couple oddities that I'm eager to get a more updated opinion on one day once I have greater perspective. When I bought Red Dead Redemption in 2013, I bought another game beside it, Batman Arkham Asylum. As I mentioned, this period was the peak of my Batman fandom, but that only extended to the live-action movies at this point in time. This was my first experience with Kevin Conroy as Batman and Mark Hamill as the Joker, and I fell in love with both their portrayals instantly. Asylum's got a really goofy final boss fight with a roided-up Joker, but I'm a fan of the game otherwise. It expertly nails the mood and the tone. The Scarecrow Nightmare section scared the hell out of me on my first playthrough, even as a 15-year-old, as did the Killer Croc sewer fight. I enjoy all the Arkham games, but their open worlds often feel pretty empty to me. I probably still like Arkham City and Arkham Knight more, but I really dig the more confined nature of Asylum. Speaking of Arkham City, I think it probably has the strongest story top to bottom of the series. Any characters you were sad you didn't get to see in Asylum, you probably get to see here in City. Gameplay is improved across the board, even if the side missions of the open world aren't the most exciting things in the world. People like to skip over this one, but I won't. I always thought Arkham Origins was good. It is the ugly stepchild of the franchise for sure, just because it's the only one that Rocksteady didn't develop themselves, and it was probably only made because Warner Brothers didn't want such a long gap between entries, but it's another one that I enjoyed at the time. However, it is the absolute worst offender of the empty open world category in these games. It really does feel like there's nothing interesting to do when you're not doing the main story. The story itself does annoy me a little bit now. The whole premise of assassins all being hired to kill Batman on Christmas Eve night is a really cool one, but it falls apart just to give us a twist that the game is actually about the first night Batman and Joker meet. Nothing against the performances of Roger Craig Smith and Troy Baker in these roles, but it just makes the game less interesting to me. Do y'all remember this game had online multiplayer? I actually played it quite a bit at the time, and even though there was no population whatsoever, I had some shameful fun with this. This is not the best Arkham game, probably the opposite, but I think it does enough to justify its existence and warrant another playthrough from time to time. The 360 was also my introduction to Bethesda games, most notably Skyrim. A buddy let me borrow this one after giving me the hard sell on it, and after I finally gave in, I couldn't believe how much I fell in love with Skyrim. I played it most on Xbox One when the special edition came out in 2016, but this was my introduction to what would become one of my favorite games of all time. Skyrim is home to many of my most vivid gaming memories. Fighting a dragon for the first time, being betrayed by the Thieves Guild, climbing High Hrothgar, getting pissed off at Nazim every time he speaks to me, I can go on. I'm constantly thinking about playing it again, and the prospect does excite me, even if I'm sure the game is probably going to show its age to me more than it ever has. Skyrim also convinced me to give the Fallout games a shot for the first time. I dabbled in Fallout 3 for a few hours here and there, but the game I gave more of my time was New Vegas. I only finally beat New Vegas a couple years ago, but it's probably my favorite Fallout game. I've still never been a massive Fallout fan either way, but I would have never played any of them to begin with had it not been for Skyrim. You remember a little bit ago when I talked about how huge of a deal the Wii was? Yeah, it was so huge that the other consoles had to get in on some of that action. PS3 copied it very directly with PlayStation Move, a motion controller with wrist straps tracked by a sensor. Xbox 360 had a more unique take on motion controls, the Kinect. Kinect is an external camera that you purchase and plug into your 360 with a motion tracker and a microphone. As its slogan says, you are the controller. It's a totally hands-free experience, no controllers, no peripherals of any kind. Games are entirely motion controlled and or use its microphone for inputs. I got my own Kinect in 2011, a year after its release. I only ever had a few games that were made for it. Kinect Adventures came bundled with it, and I also had Wipeout 2. I had free trials of Fruit Ninja Kinect and The Gunstringer, which I heard were two of the better games that Kinect ever made, but I never played them again after the trials ran out. Wipeout 2 was actually a hell of a workout game for me at the time. Middle and high school were definitely the best shape I'd ever been in my life athletically, but that didn't matter. Wipeout 2 still kicked my ass and I would play it just to stay active. What I played most was Kinect Adventures though. It's definitely no Wii Sports, but really, what can be? Wii Sports is such a perfect tech demo for the Wii, showing different things that you can do with the motion controller, and I find it endlessly replayable still to this very day. Kinect Adventures fulfills the same purpose, showing you what you can do with the Kinect, offering 5 different minigames much like Wii Sports did. I don't mind any of the minigames, but the best one is probably the River Rush, which gave me the best workout. The rest are fun enough, and I do enjoy Rally Ball in particular, but it's nothing to write home about. And that was my Kinect experience. The games I did own, I played a decent amount, but it wasn't a lasting fad for me like the Wii was, for example. I kept it around and I still have it to this very day, including some of the footage that you saw in this video. But the most use I got out of my Kinect was not as a way to play games, it was as a microphone. In summer 2013, the first microphone that I got with my 360 broke, and I had to scramble for a replacement. The replacement I had to go with was my Kinect. For the whole summer, in a summer where all my friends and I played were first-person shooters. Yeah, I don't think they'll ever forgive me for that one, and I don't blame them if they never do. Kinect did have a few other games that I wanted to try, but never had the chance to, mostly just based on the franchises I was into at the time, like Harry Potter and Star Wars. There was also a UFC training game that I wanted, but never got, until a few days ago. I also wanted to play Kinect Sports, but never owned either version, again, until a couple days ago. From my brief playtime with both of these, I definitely get the sense that I didn't miss that much with either of them, but that can unfortunately be said for Kinect as a whole. Very few games felt like they did enough to really justify its existence, but I still have fond memories of it, and I did enjoy going back to it for this video. It did last into the Xbox One era, pretty controversially, but the 360 was its peak, even though the peak wasn't very high. There's a genre of games I've been saving for last, and you heard me just allude to them in the last section. I know I said 360 expanded my horizons, but I'd be lying to you if I said my bread and butter wasn't first-person shooters during this era. You couldn't escape shooters if you had a 360 or PS3, and the market became very cluttered very quickly. I still couldn't get enough, even without a connection to the internet still. Of course, the big ones for me are the Halo games. I've only officially covered up through Halo 3 with my other videos, but it's safe to say the series was represented very well during this era. Halo 3 is one of my favorite games of all time, with my favorite campaign in the series, and arguably its best multiplayer component. I got to play it online in the tail end of its run before MCC released on Xbox One, which left it with basically no population until the 360 service for all the Halo games got shut down a couple of years later. The series didn't get bigger or better than Halo 3 in my opinion, but it stayed strong throughout the generation. The next entry was a spin-off, Halo 3 ODST. It was originally an expansion to Halo 3 before becoming its own game. It doesn't have its own multiplayer outside of the new Firefight mode, which was a response to the Horde mode game types that were getting popular at the time. It also brought its own campaign, which was set during the events of Halo 2. I've got plans to get to this game soon, but suffice it to say it's another solid entry in the series with arguably the best soundtrack. I didn't actually end up playing this one until 2015, or right before I bought my Xbox One, but the best compliment I can give is that I really wish I'd been able to play it sooner. The next entry is another that I wished I'd gotten to play much sooner. Bungie's last Halo game, Halo Reach, is a prequel to the first game. I didn't get to properly play it until 2013, and I'll talk about my online gaming experience soon, but this was the Halo my friends were most into. I had my problems with it, but some of my fondest 360 memories come from playing custom games with my friends in Halo Reach. The standard multiplayer is enjoyable, but it relies too much on the Forge mode and rips all of its developer-made maps from campaign locations. That definitely let me down a bit, and so did the campaign itself for a long time. Reach's campaign is definitely good, but it was one of my least favorites in the series at the time. My last couple playthroughs have made me appreciate it much more, and we'll see how I feel when I get back to it eventually. Another game that's maybe more controversially near and dear to me still is Halo 4, which was 343 Industries' first entry for the series. This was one of the first games I ever bought on opening day, a long-awaited direct sequel to Halo 3 which brought back Master Chief and Cortana. I drank the Kool-Aid for a while with Halo 4. I was convinced it had the best story in the series, and even further convinced that I loved all of the gameplay changes. I will say, any moments between Chief and Cortana are still excellent, but the overall story feels very undercooked with hindsight. The campaign itself can be a bit of a slog to get through since the new Prometheans just aren't very fun to fight, and the new version of the Covenant is really only there just to be something to fight. It serves no greater purpose than that. It hits the beats it needs to hit from a story standpoint, but I'm not defending it as one of the best Halo games anymore. A very interesting discussion point for me now is its multiplayer. When I finally got Wi-Fi in 2013, this was the game that I was dying to play. It was the newest Halo on the market, and I was so insulated without an internet connection at the time, I didn't actually know what the overall opinion on this game was. I had no idea people didn't like it, and when I got the chance to play, I was hooked. You couldn't convince me that this wasn't the best thing since sliced bread at the time. It's safe to say my thoughts have changed in the last decade, but the fond memories are still there, and I'll still defend this game overall. There are two games that immediately spring to mind when I think of playing the 360 online, Halo 4 and Modern Warfare 3. I was never the biggest Call of Duty fan compared to my friends, but it's another series I played a lot even before I had the internet, and even more once I did. I played through all three Modern Warfare campaigns numerous times. I also owned Black Ops 1, and much later, Black Ops 2. It's kinda wild to me looking back at how much mileage I got out of FPS campaigns at the time, especially the COD games. My friends didn't all have Black Ops 2, but everybody had Modern Warfare 3. When I finally got the chance to play online, I was abysmal, and I never got much better. Every few years I go back to play multiplayer in a COD game, and I just never have a fun time. I enjoy zombies, but the regular multiplayer has always gotten very old to me very quickly. Regardless, when I was first playing online, it was non-stop Halo 4 and MW3. I eventually got Black Ops 2, which I'd say is probably my favorite entry in the series top to bottom today, but the COD games have just never been as magical to me as they were when I was just playing the campaigns. My friend group also loved the Battlefield games. I got Battlefield 3 shortly after getting Wi-Fi in my house, and I spent so many hours playing Rush and Conquest with the boys. My now roommate absolutely swore by Battlefield 3 for years. He would always tell you it was his favorite game of all time if he was prompted. I got Battlefield 3 in 2013, which was the same year that Battlefield 4 was released, and that quickly took over for 3 in the friend group. This was the game in the series that we played the most for years and years and years well into the Xbox One era. We dabbled in the later entries, but 3 and 4 were really the only ones that we cared about. The single player was nothing to write home about, but so many late nights were spent just blowing shit up in Battlefield. What set these games apart for me, in particular, was the destructible environments, something I hadn't really seen in the shooters that I played. When we weren't busy destroying in Battlefield, we enjoyed building in Minecraft. Minecraft is a game that I've never quite loved like other people have, but I played it a ton with friends for a good couple years there. I've just never had the patience for building in games, whether it's a forge map in Halo or an entire world in Minecraft. You put me in Minecraft, you're just going to get the blandest looking rectangular house from me. But I still really dug the calm, laid back vibes of building upper worlds together. It's another one that I dabble in briefly every couple years to this day. I stuck with the 360 well into the Xbox One era. I finally upgraded in July 2015, but I still went back to my 360 regularly, at least until backwards compatibility finally caught up. After that, I only really went back if there was a specific game I could only play there. I remember in 2016 I got the Metal Gear Solid HD collection, and quite literally dusted the 360 off with my Turtle Beach headset to play Snake Eater. After that, I didn't touch it again for years. The next time I did, at least regularly, was to capture footage from my Halo 1 and 2 video essays. Once I started using it again more regularly, I realized I still love this console, and I always have. In college and the first few years after I graduated, I didn't have many financial responsibilities, so I spent that money collecting video games. It was mostly Nintendo, but in the last couple years I've started collecting 360 games again. So many of them are backwards compatible, and their best versions are playable on Series X now, but when I see a game that I never owned or that I want to try, I try and pick it up now whether it's backwards compatible or not. I've had a bad habit of completely abandoning a previous console when the new one comes out. I don't just mean playing it less, I also mean diminishing it in my head. I think I looked down on the 360 for a long time after I upgraded it, but with the benefit of greater hindsight, I appreciate it so much more and I've been able to really put into perspective just how important this was to my life. It made me so much closer to my friends that I still have to this day. I could always count on the boys being home any given night to play something. We could boot up Halo, Battlefield, Call of Duty, Minecraft, you name it, and we'd have a great night. Those memories are irreplaceable for me. And not just that either. My horizons were forever expanded as a single-player gamer because of this console. Xbox 360 shaped me as a gamer forever. That's something I'll always be grateful for. It's sad to see Microsoft fully moving on from it, but I'm happy to know that I can go back to it whenever I want, and that most of its best games are still available for me to play to this day. Xbox 360 has given me so many memories that I'll cherish forever, and I'm looking forward to continuing to make new ones. Thank you all so much for joining me for this video. This was a bit of a spur-of-the-moment idea for me. The next video, which I have been working on, was going to be Halo 3 ODST, and I will get to that soon enough. I recently got some 360 games on a trip to Vintage Stock, our local used media shop, and I was just having so much fun that it kind of brought a wave of nostalgia on for me. One thing led to another. I was browsing the 360 again, just kind of taking a trip down memory lane, and I saw what was going on with the marketplace, and I looked it up. Didn't realize how close we were to the marketplace shutting down. And when I saw that, I just felt like it was the ideal time to look back on the history of the 360, as I saw it. Obviously, there's a lot of games that I never got the chance to play. There are some games I played that I neglected to mention here just because they weren't that important of a factor in me at the time, some of which I've gone back to play, some of which I'm still going to go back to play eventually. This is a fun trip down memory lane for me, and I hope it was for you, if you were a 360 gamer. If you were a 360 gamer, let me know what games that you love the most, let me know what you're mad that I haven't played that I didn't mention. I'm sure there will be some of that, but either way, I'm really thankful for you guys for watching my videos as you have, and I'm looking forward to continuing to make more. Like I said, next video should be Halo 3 ODST, but you never know, if I get another random spur-of-the-moment idea that really captures me, then I'll make that. But for now, I'll see you next time for Halo 3 ODST. Peace out, folks.